Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room smelled of gun oil, sweat, and desert dust, the signature perfume of the men who lived for the next mission. The clatter of coffee mugs and the dry rasp of map paper filled the silence as Lieutenant Commander Thorne's voice carved through the air like a blade. Same range protocol, same qualification sequence, no exceptions. 12 men nodded, one didn't. Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma sat near the end of the table, her dark eyes steady, her posture straight but unassuming. She didn't take notes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. She had already memorized every contour of the valley they'd deploy into, every route, every fallback point. Yet somehow, her presence felt like an intrusion here, like a note that didn't belong in a military anthem. The others had seen her file, signals intelligence, cyber warfare, 2 years behind a desk at Virginia Beach. They saw a specialist with clean fingernails and perfect posture. They didn't see the calloused hands or the tiny scar just under her jawline from a fragment of metal that once tried to end her life. They didn't ask, and she didn't volunteer. Thorne didn't look at her as he assigned positions. His eyes swept the room like searchlights, but skipped over her every time. A silence followed the orders, filled only by the hum of the overhead fan that couldn't beat the Afghan heat. When he dismissed the group, the men moved with purpose, banter, boots, and laughter. Anna rose slowly. Her heart beat steady, but her jaw tightened as she felt the familiar isolation of being tolerated but not trusted. She followed them outside. The sunlight hit like a hammer. The air was thick, visible, vibrating in waves above the sand. Somewhere beyond the fence, a goat bleated. The sound of rifles cracking from the nearby range echoed across the open flatland like thunder. The men of SEAL Team 4's Delta Platoon were already in motion, checking rifles, adjusting optics, testing radios. They worked like a machine, and she was in extra gear. Thorne barked an order. "All right, Rico, you're up first. Show the chief how we do business out here." The men chuckled. A few exchanged smirks. Anna caught the tone. It wasn't humor. It was theater. They were about to make a point. Petty Officer First Class Mateo Rico Vargas grinned as he picked up the MK-22 sniper rifle, the team's pride. He was their shooter, their easy charm hiding an ego as sharp as his trigger finger. He looked at her with a flash of teeth. "Don't blink, Chief. You might miss it." She didn't respond, didn't smirk, didn't look away, just watched, calm, measuring. He dropped to the mat, the bipod leg sinking slightly into the sand. The scope gleamed in the sun. The heat shimmered across the range, targets like mirages between 600 and 1,500 meters, steel ghosts in the desert. Thorne crossed his arms and glanced at Anna. "Pay attention, Chief Sharma. This isn't a simulation. Out here, variables have consequences. Wind, heat, dust. They don't respond to algorithms." The dismissal was deliberate. She'd heard it before in different words in different countries under different commanders. It was never about her skill. It was about what she was. She said nothing. The first shot cracked. The air split. A puff of dust erupted left of the 600-meter target. "No ping." Rico cursed quietly, adjusted, fired again, missed again, high this time. The chatter stopped. The desert seemed to listen. The third shot went wide. The fourth landed somewhere no one could see. The fifth barely kissed the edge of the berm. He rolled to his knees, frustration written across his face. Something off, scopes loose, must have taken a knock. Thorne's expression darkened. "Gunner, check it." The armorer moved with the precision of a surgeon, tools glinting in the sun. He examined the rifle, muttering, measuring, tightening, rechecking. The others hovered close, their earlier confidence quietly dissolving. Minutes passed, sweat trickled down necks, dust clung to eyelashes. Finally, Gunner straightened. "There's a fracture in the Picatinny rail under the forward scope mount. Tiny, but it's torquing the mount with every shot. You're never gonna hold zero, sir. It's non-mission capable. Silent, even the wind seemed to pause. Thorne's jaw flexed. The best rifle in the platoon broken, their best shooter humbled. The team shifted uneasily, glancing at Anna as if the fault somehow extended to her. She didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed on the weapon, studying it like a wounded animal. Thorne exhaled sharply, ready to end the drill. But before he could speak, her voice, calm, soft, but cutting through the heavy air, stopped him. "Let me try that." The words hung there, simple, bare. Heads turned, Rico let out a short laugh. "Try what, Chief? It's broken, scope's useless." Thorne's eyes narrowed. He saw the trident on her chest, but not the years it took to earn it. He saw a woman out of her element, but something in her tone, so calm it bordered on defiant, made him hesitate. He gave a dry, humorless smile. "Fine, the range is yours, don't waste my time." Anna walked forward. No hesitation, no bravado. The sun glared off her mirrored sunglasses. Her boots sank lightly into the sand as she approached the rifle. She lifted it with both hands, felt its imbalance, the tension in the mount, the slight rattle where there should have been stillness. The rifle wasn't just metal, it was a language. Broken, yes, but one she understood. She didn't lie prone right away. She stood, letting the weight settle into her arms, her fingers feeling the imperfections. Then, with deliberate care, she dropped to the mat Rico had left. The men watched, the air grew still. She loaded 5 rounds, click. For a long moment she did nothing but breathe. Her eyes moved, not on the targets, but on the air between them. The wind's invisible dance, the shimmer of heat rising, the lazy circle of a hawk 1,000 feet up, tracing unseen currents. Then she lay down fully, cheek to stock, her breathing so steady it was almost unnatural. First shot. Crack. Dust erupted low and left, worse than Rico. Laughter rippled through the team. She ignored it, ejected the casing. The first shot wasn't meant to hit, it was meant to measure, a data point. The rifle had told her its truth. Without touching the scope, she adjusted her body. A fraction here, an inch there. Her mind was doing quiet math, wind, drift, offset, the rail's distortion, the milled dots on the reticle as a new coordinate system. Second shot. Crack. Ping. A clean, perfect ring of steel, dead center. The laughter stopped. Thorne's arms, crossed tight across his chest, slowly loosened. Rico blinked, unsure if he'd imagined it. Anna cycled the bolt. Calm, mechanical, her face gave away nothing. Third shot ping, fourth ping, fifth ping. 5 rounds, 4 perfect hits, 1 deliberate miss for calibration. No celebration, no smirk, just a quiet exhale as she reloaded. Someone, Jax, the youngest, wordlessly handed her another magazine. It was the first silent gesture of respect. She nodded slightly, no words. The next targets moved, tracks at 700 meters, sliding across the range like ghosts in the heat. Every SEAL on the line knew how hard this was. Moving targets, crosswinds, mechanical offset. Nearly impossible. Anna tracked the target, smooth, breathing synced to rhythm. Crack. Ping. A moving hit, then another and another. 5 in a row. The murmurs faded. Every eye was locked on her. Even Thorne stepped closer, his earlier certainty crumbling. She wasn't just shooting. She was communicating with physics, with air, with imperfection itself. Her body moved with minimal effort. Her trigger brakes were invisible. Her rhythm wasn't military, it was musical. And as the last moving target fell, the silence became reverent. Thorne cleared his throat. "That's enough, Chief. You've made your point." She didn't answer. Her eyes were still fixed downrange. 30 targets, Commander, she said quietly. I've hit 15. A pause. Then the hiss of pneumatic pressure. The next pop-up appeared. She fired before anyone could blink. Ping. 1 second, two, three more, five impossible hits. Rico swallowed hard, staring at the horizon. No damn way, he whispered. The dust shimmered. The world seemed smaller now, compressed into her scope and her breath. She reloaded again. 10 targets remained, the hardest, tiny plates at the farthest edge of range. She read the wind like scripture, waited between gusts, fired. Ping! Fired again. Ping! Each round was a conversation, between what was broken and what still worked. As she approached the final shot, the 1,500-meter target, the wind roared again. Sand blew across the mat. A lesser shooter would have waited. Anna didn't. She breathed in, half out, paused. Crack! The rifle kicked, brass spun into the dust. 3 long seconds. Then faint but clear. Ping! The range went silent. She placed the rifle down gently as though setting down a sleeping child, then stood. No smile, no nod, just quiet dignity. She turned and walked toward the ammo crates, her shadow stretching long in the late sun. Behind her, 30 gleaming casings caught the light, proof not of perfection, but of understanding. For a long moment no one moved. Rico stared at his hands. Thorne's jaw flexed, but his voice failed him. Then slowly something changed. The air itself seemed to soften. The respect in the silence was louder than any cheer. No one spoke, but every man knew what had just happened wasn't luck. It was discipline, grace, and something deeper, something earned in quiet places no one else had seen. And as Anna walked away from the range, her steps steady, her heart calm, one thought lingered. Sometimes what's broken doesn't fail. Sometimes it teaches you how to adapt. The desert had gone quiet. The sun slipped behind the mountains, leaving streaks of dying orange across the horizon. The heat was still there, clinging to the ground, but the edge had softened. The range was nearly empty now, just a scatter of brass, the faint scent of cordite, and the whisper of wind moving through the valley like a tired ghost. Anna stood at the far end of the range, near the ammo crates, her face calm, unreadable. She had taken off her gloves. Her fingers, still smelling faintly of oil and metal, rested on the edge of the crate as if grounding herself. Behind her, the platoon lingered longer than usual, packing gear in silence. No one knew what to say. Rico hadn't looked at her since the last shot. He moved slowly, cleaning his scope with a cloth that kept slipping from his damp hands. Thorne stood near the Humvee, talking to no one, the rigid posture of command giving way to something more human, confusion, maybe even respect, though he didn't know how to show it. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She wasn't supposed to be the one teaching them something today. The desert wind caught the corner of a range flag, making it flutter weakly. The metal targets downrange gleamed faintly under the fading light, 30 mute witnesses to something they hadn't understood. When the Humvee's low rumble broke the silence, every head turned. The vehicle stopped near the shelter. A man climbed out, broad, scarred, his presence cutting through the air like a tide. His uniform was dusty, his beard more gray than black, but his eyes, sharp, assessing, alive, carried the weight of decades. Command Master Chief Miller. Even Thorne straightened at the sight of him. Miller's boots crunched on the gravel as he approached, scanning the field with a faint grin tugging at one corner of his mouth. Heard there was a problem with the MK-22 rail, he said, his voice gravel and smoke. Figured I'd come see who won the argument, man or metal. His gaze landed on the rifle lying on the mat. Then it drifted to Anna. He looked her up and down once, the way old operators did, reading not posture but energy. Still haven't lost the touch, Kestrel. The name cut through the air like a detonator. Every head turned. Rico froze mid-motion. Thorne blinked. Kestrel, he echoed, as if the word were in a foreign language. Miller chuckled quietly. Yeah, you didn't know. He turned toward Thorne, his grin tired but warm. Before Chief Sharma was running signals for you, she was one of ours, DEVGRU, the development group. Her specialty wasn't paperwork, Commander, it was improvisation under degraded conditions. If a rifle broke, she didn't hand it to an armorer. She made it sing anyway. Thorne's expression faltered. His voice dropped, stripped of rank. She was DVGRU. Miller nodded. Used to call her Kestrel. Small, fast, always above the fight. Put her on a mountainside with nothing but a rifle and a radio, and she'd do the work of a platoon. The air shifted. The revelation landed heavy, not loud, not dramatic, just real. Rico's jaw tightened. He looked at Anna, and for the first time the grin that always sat on his face was gone. What replaced it wasn't embarrassment, it was realization. Anna didn't look at anyone. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, on the line where the light was dying behind the peaks. She didn't confirm or deny the story. She didn't need to. Miller gave a small, knowing nod. Good to see you again, Chief. You still clean your own rifles. A flicker of a smile crossed her lips. Always. Then he was gone, his boots crunching back toward the Humvee, his silhouette swallowed by the twilight. Thorne didn't follow him. He stood there, arms loose at his sides, his face an unreadable mix of respect, guilt, and confusion. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Why didn't you tell me? Anna turned slightly, just enough for her eyes to meet his. Would it have changed anything? He didn't answer. She gave the faintest shrug. I'm here to help the mission, sir, not my resume. The words landed like a quiet verdict, not harsh, just true. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the dry, electric scent of a coming sandstorm. As the last light faded, the team finished packing in silence. Rico approached her near the water cooler, holding out a cold bottle. He didn't say a word. She took it, nodding once. Their eyes met, his full of questions, hers giving none away. When he turned back, something in his posture had changed. His swagger had dissolved into stillness. Every motion, folding the bipod, stowing his rifle, was slower, more deliberate. The others mirrored it. Without a word, the entire rhythm of the platoon had shifted. Respect has a sound, it's silence. By the time the range lights flickered off, only one remained. Anna stayed behind. The hum of insects filled the night. A lone bulb cast a pale circle of light over a wooden bench. On it lay the Mk-22, the same rifle, cleaned but still cracked, its imperfection hidden under a thin sheen of oil. She stood over it, sleeves rolled up, her hands steady. The clatter of small tools punctuated the quiet. A brush, a cloth, the slow rhythm of care. It wasn't maintenance. It was something closer to forgiveness. The rifle wasn't useless, just misunderstood. Broken things often were. She ran her fingers over the fracture in the rail, tracing it like a scar. Her mind drifted, not to the range, not to Thorne's look of disbelief, but further back. Another mountain, another wind. Afghanistan, years ago. Different valley, different time. Her breath hitched. The ghost of that night still lingered, the one where everything had gone wrong. She had been perched on a high ridge, the moon fractured by clouds, her team below pinned. The radio had gone dead halfway through the contact. Her spotter was down, her rifle's scope cracked. She remembered the sound, the silence after chaos, the moment when the world went still and cruel. And then, just like today, she had looked through broken glass and made impossible shots. Not because she wanted to, because someone below her was still alive. That night had earned her the name Kestrel, the bird that hunts from impossible heights, the bird that sees what others can't. She wiped the rifle clean, the scent of oil filling the air. In the dark distance, the steel plates stood silent, glinting faintly under starlight. 30 witnesses, 30 truths. When she was done, she set the weapon back in its hard case, closing the latches with soft metallic clicks. She lingered a moment longer, watching the lights from the barracks flicker faintly across the compound. Somewhere out there, Rico was probably still awake, replaying every shot in his mind. Maybe Thorn, too. Maybe wondering how many things they'd misjudged, not just her but themselves. She took a slow breath. The night air was cool now, almost kind. There's a certain peace in being misunderstood. No expectations, no noise, just the quiet space between what people think you are and what you truly know yourself to be. Her father used to say it differently. Dignity doesn't shout. She smiled faintly at the memory. He'd been a soldier too, one who never raised his voice, never demanded attention. But when things broke, radios, plans, morale, he was the one they looked to. She turned off the light. Darkness swallowed the bench. Only the stars remained, bright, patient, and watching. As she walked away, the faint jingle of her dog tags broke the stillness, the only sound against the vast quiet of the Afghan night. She didn't know it yet, but what happened that day would travel faster than any report. By morning, whispers would spread through every platoon on base, about the analyst who outshot Delta, about the woman who used a broken rifle to make the impossible look easy. They'd tell it like a story, embellish it, distort it. But she didn't care, because for her it wasn't a story. It was a reminder of who she used to be and of the cost of trying to forget. And as the wind carried dust over the range, burying footprints and brass, the desert did what it always did. It kept secrets. The helicopter's blades tore through the night. Dust, darkness, and vibration, everything blurred together in rhythmic violence. Inside the cabin, 12 operators sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces ghostly under the green hue of NVG light. No one spoke. It wasn't silence born of fear. It was focus, the kind that settled in your bones before an operation. Anna sat near the door, her rifle cradled across her lap. Not the broken Mk-22. That one was still on the range, sealed in its case like a relic. This was her own weapon, a customized SR-25, black and balanced with the faintest scuffs along the receiver. A professional's rifle, a trusted one. The wind from the open door whipped her hair loose from its tie, strands flicking across her cheek. She ignored it. Her gaze was fixed on the terrain sliding below, endless ridges, shadowed valleys, and the pale silver threads of dry riverbeds twisting like veins through the mountains. The Hindu Kush. Rugged, ancient, merciless. The mission brief had been simple. Go in quiet. Confirm a high-value target operating out of a remote compound used to relay encrypted transmissions. Eliminate if necessary. Recover the hardware. Extract before dawn. But simple on paper rarely meant easy in the field. Thorne sat across from her, helmet low, eyes forward. The lines in his face looked deeper under the green light. He hadn't spoken much since the range. When he did, his tone had changed, not softer but more deliberate, as if he was still recalibrating how to talk to her. Rico was beside him, fidgeting with his gloves, the movement small but constant. His usual cocky grin was gone. He hadn't called her chief with that teasing tone since the day she'd outshot him. Now, when he looked at her, it wasn't with competition. It was with curiosity. She caught his glance and gave the faintest nod. That was enough. A silent truce. The pilot's voice crackled in her headset. 2 minutes to drop. The men checked gear, chambered rounds, tightened straps, the usual ritual quick, practiced, wholly in its own way. Thorne's voice came through the intercom. Remember the plan. Team 1 on Overwatch Ridge. Team 2 approaches the compound from the east. No lights, no chatter. We move fast, we stay invisible. Anna's team was Overwatch. High ground, long shots, silent eyes. Her world. As the helicopter banked, the horizon tilted, revealing the jagged line of peaks under a silver moon. They looked like 1,000 knives rising from the earth. The bird dropped fast. Her stomach lurched, then steadied. Go! Boots hit dirt. The rotor wash filled the night with a storm of dust and grit. Then silence. The bird lifted away, its noise fatting into the wind until it was just another ghost in the dark. Anna crouched low. The air was thin and sharp, the kind that bit your lungs. She could smell the metallic cold of altitude, the faint scent of stone dust. "Check in," Thorne's whisper came over comms. "Team 1 set," Rico replied. "Copy," Anna said quietly. They moved uphill, boots crunching lightly over shale. The mountain seemed alive under them, breathing, shifting, creaking with the ancient patience of time. By the time they reached the ridge, her pulse had slowed again. She unfolded her bipod, settled behind her rifle, and scanned the valley below. The compound sat like a scar on the earth, a cluster of low stone buildings half buried in the slope. No visible guards, no movement, but the stillness itself was wrong. "Something off," she whispered. Rico peered through his spotting scope beside her. "You mean other than the fact that this place looks like a ghost town?" She didn't answer. Her instincts weren't about appearances. They were about rhythm, and this place had none. It was too quiet, too still. The team below began to move, shadows against darker shadows, slipping between rocks, closing distance. Anna tracked them through her scope, eyes calm but sharp. The wind up here was fickle, tugging at her sling, whispering through the barrel like a living thing. Thorne's voice came through again, barely audible. "Team 2 at entry point. Breach on my mark." A pause. The faint click of a door, then silence. No alarm, no movement. Rico frowned. "You seeing this?" She nodded slowly. "They're inside, but—" She stopped. Something flickered in her peripheral vision. A glint, tiny, quick. She shifted her scope a fraction. On the far ridge, barely visible, a shape moved. Not natural, not wind. Her breath caught. "Thorne," she said softly, "we've got heat on your 6. Ridge line west, multiple signatures." "Say again." She zoomed in. 2, no, 4 figures, heat blooming in her scope like embers. They were moving fast, flanking. "Ambush," she said, calm but certain. "You're compromised." The radio exploded with static and gunfire. Below, the compound lit up with muzzle flashes. The night shattered into chaos. "Contact, contact," someone yelled through the comms. Anna's hand steadied the rifle. Her heartbeat didn't spike. She lived this before, this switch from stillness to violence. Rico cursed under his breath. "They were waiting for us." "Focus," she said. Her scope locked on to a muzzle flash on the ridge. She exhaled, half breath, and fired. Crack. The target dropped. She moved immediately, shifting aim. Crack, another fell. The valley echoed with thunder. Her rifle sang its measured rhythm. Thorne's voice cut through, heavy with strain. "Team 2 taking fire, multiple hostiles, northwest wall." "Copy," she said. Her voice stayed calm, always calm. She tracked movement through smoke and chaos, reading the terrain like a map she'd known all her life. Every shot was a decision. Every pull of the trigger was an act of faith. 1, 2, 3. She could feel Rico's eyes on her even as he relayed positions. "Got eyes on your left flank," he said. 3 hostiles moving through the brush. "I see them." Crack, crack, crack. Silence. For a few heartbeats, the world steadied again. Then an explosion. The compound's eastern wall blew outward, scattering debris and flame. Anna flinched from the blast wave even from 400 meters up. The comms went wild, shouts, static, then Thorne's strained voice. "We're hit. Jax is down. We're pulling back." Anna's jaw tightened. Her hands moved faster. The wind howled through the pass, distorting sound, carrying voices like ghosts. "Thorne, what's your position?" "Inside the main structure, north end, 2 wounded. We're boxed in." She shifted her scope. The smoke was thick, turning everything into a shifting mirage. Rico adjusted beside her. "Can't see anything through this mess." "Switch to thermal," she said. He flicked a switch. The world turned to shapes of heat and movement. Through it, the building glowed faintly, surrounded by colder shadows. And then she saw them, dozens, moving in from the hills. It wasn't an ambush, it was a trap. Her gut went cold. "Thorn," she said quietly, "you've got a full squad moving in from the west slope, 20 plus. Extraction's 5 clicks out," he replied. "We'll never make it." Anna's hand paused on the trigger. Choices, always choices. Then her voice came back, low but resolute. "Then we hold the ridge." Rico blinked at her. "What?" She didn't look up. "We buy them time." He hesitated, then nodded. "Copy that." Together, they began to fire. Their rifles cracked in rhythm, their breath synced. Targets moved through fire and smoke like phantoms. One by one they fell. 2 down. Left flank clear. Reloading. Time blurred. The cold wind bit at their fingers. Shell casings piled in the dirt, hot against the night air. For every one they dropped, 2 more appeared. Thorne's voice cut through again, hoarse but alive. "We're moving, 30 seconds." Anna's lips pressed tight. She adjusted again, breathing deep. Her shoulder ached from recoil. Her cheekbone throbbed from hours behind the scope, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. A burst of movement caught her eye. Someone sprinting from the compound, dragging another man. "Got them," she said. Her reticle hovered over the path leading out of the valley. A truck engine roared in the distance. The extraction convoy, late but there. "Go," she whispered, even though they couldn't hear her. Her final shots weren't defensive, they were farewell. Each one clearing a path, each one buying seconds. By the time the team reached the convoy, Anna's rifle was nearly dry. She watched the last figures disappear into the dust trail of the departing vehicle. Then finally she exhaled. The wind had died. The valley was still again, filled only with the echo of what had just happened. Rico lay beside her, chest heaving. His voice broke the quiet. "You just saved their lives." Anna shook her head softly. "We saved their lives." He looked at her, the hint of a smile returning, this time without bravado. "You're something else, Chief." She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the smoke still rising from the compound below. Something twisted inside her chest. Not pride, not relief, something heavier. It was never the shooting that haunted her. It was the silence afterward. The way the world looked exactly the same, even though something inside you was. She packed her rifle slowly, one piece at a time. The barrel was warm against her palm. As they began the long hike down the ridge, the first hint of dawn broke over the mountains, soft, gold light spilling over black rock. The mission was technically a success, but she felt none of it. She'd seen too many successful missions end with ghosts. Behind them, the compound smoldered. Ahead, the path wound down toward the valley floor, a narrow trail between shadow and sun. Rico broke the silence after a while. "You ever think about leaving all this behind?" Anna smiled faintly. "I tried once." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. The sun crept higher. Their shadows stretched long and thin across the rocks. Somewhere in the wind, a hawk cried, a lone sound echoing across the peaks. Rico glanced up. "You think that's your namesake?" She followed his gaze. The bird was small, dark against the dawn. It soared easily, gliding without effort, never flapping, just reading the currents. She watched it for a long time, eyes narrowed against the light. "Maybe," she said softly, "or maybe it's just a reminder." "Of what?" She smiled. "That sometimes you have to see from above to understand what's happening below." The wind caught her words and carried them away. Below them the mountains waited, endless, silent, unchanged. But something within the platoon had shifted forever. The base was quieter than usual that night. Even the generators seemed to hum softer, as if the desert itself was listening. The convoy rolled through the gates just before midnight. The vehicles were caked with dust, their headlights dimmed to slits. Men climbed out slowly, their movements heavy, not from injury, but from the weight of what they'd just lived through. Anna stepped off last. The moment her boots hit the ground, the smell hit her too: diesel, blood, burnt powder, the familiar trinity of survival. Rico followed, limping slightly. His shoulder was grazed, nothing serious, but his silence was new. The others said little, some nodding to her, others avoiding her eyes entirely. Not out of shame, out of respect they didn't yet know how to express. They were alive because of her. But no one said that out loud. The medics moved in quickly, pulling Jax out of the truck. His face was pale under the dust, but his pulse still flickered against the medic's fingers. Thorne was right behind him, helmet under his arm, eyes hard and hollow. He looked older than he had that morning. "Chief," he said quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Inside, debrief in 10. She nodded once. "Aye, sir." He walked off toward the command tent, his posture rigid but uneven, like a man trying to stay upright against something heavier than gravity. Anna stood there for a long moment. The night air was cool, but her skin still burned from the adrenaline that hadn't faded yet. Around her, the base pulsed with quiet activity: mechanics, guards, the murmur of distant radio chatter. But she was somewhere else entirely. Her mind replayed the valley, the shots, the smoke, the echoes of men yelling through static. The moment Jax went down, the sound of Thorne's voice breaking over comms. She closed her eyes. The images didn't fade. They never did. They only grew quieter with time until the next mission turned them up again. Breathe, she reminded herself. Just breathe. She dropped her pack beside the water cooler, poured a cup, and stared at the reflection trembling on its surface. Her face looked composed, but her eyes told a different story. Control wasn't calm, it was containment. And containment always cracked eventually. She finished the water, set the cup down, and headed toward the debrief tent. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Maps lay scattered across the table, corners weighed down by spent shell casings. Thorne stood near the edge of the room, arms crossed, staring at nothing. Two men from command sat opposite him, their clipboards too clean, their uniforms too crisp for the world beyond the wire. "Sit, Chief," one of them said, not unkindly. She did. The debrief began the way they always did, with facts. Times, positions, casualties. The words came in short bursts, efficient, detached. Thorne's voice was steady, professional. Ambush initiated at 22:34 hours. Hostile strength unknown. Estimated 24 combatants. Casualty: 1 critical, 1 minor. Engagement duration: 7 minutes 43 seconds. And your Overwatch team? Thorne's jaw flexed. Engaged multiple hostiles from elevated position. Provided suppressive and counter-sniper support. The officer's pen paused. Accuracy. Thorne hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Anna. 30+ engagements, 30+ confirmed. The pen stopped mid-note. The man looked up, brows raised. 30? That's improbable given distance and conditions. Thorne didn't blink, nevertheless. Anna said nothing. The debrief continued for another 10 minutes. Questions, answers, numbers, none of it mattered, not really. The real report was written in the lines of their faces, the small, quiet gestures of men trying to process survival. When it ended, the command officers gathered their notes and left, murmuring something about follow-ups and commendations. The tent felt bigger once they were gone. Thorne stood for a long moment, not moving. Then he said softly, without looking at her, "Why did you stay?" She frowned slightly. "Sir." He turned, finally meeting her eyes. His own were tired, red-rimmed, edged with something between frustration and guilt. "When I called for fallback, you didn't move. You could have pulled back with the others, but you didn't." Anna met his stare evenly. "Because you weren't out yet." His lips pressed together. He looked down, exhaled through his nose. You risked both positions. You disobeyed a directive. She waited. He looked back up. And you saved our lives. Silence heavy, honest. He rubbed a hand over his face. The skin on his knuckles was torn, smeared faintly with someone else's blood. You ever wonder if we're too used to chaos, that we start needing it? Her answer came quietly. Needing it, no, but expecting it always. Thorne's eyes drifted toward the map on the table. You've done this before. A lot of times, I'm guessing. She nodded once. I read your old file after the range, he said. DVGRU, Mountain Overwatch, Improvised Marksman Doctrine. Why didn't you tell me? Anna leaned back slightly, her voice steady. Because you would have treated me differently. Maybe I should have. No, she said. You needed to see me like you saw the others. No exemptions, no exceptions. Thorne studied her face for a long moment. There was no ego in her tone, no defensiveness, just truth. He sank into a chair. You think I'm hard on them. I think you carry them, she said, and you don't know how to put them down. He almost smiled, almost. You sound like my old co. Was he right? Thorne's gaze dropped again. He died with half his team in a wadi north of Helmand, so yeah, probably. The tent was quiet except for the low hum of a generator outside. After a while, Anna spoke again. Today wasn't your fault. He looked up sharply. Wasn't it? I walked them into an ambush. You walked them into a plan, she said softly. They walked into a war. There's a difference. He wanted to argue. She saw it in the tension of his jaw, but the words didn't come. Instead, he looked at her rifle case leaning against the table leg. You're different, he said. You don't rattle, not even under fire. How? Anna smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. You think I do? Thorne frowned. I just learned not to show it, she said. The first time I lost someone, I froze, completely. After that, I taught myself to look calm even when I was. Not because it helps me, because it helps the people who are looking at me. Thorne leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's a lonely way to live. She nodded slowly. It is. For a moment, the tent felt less like a command post and more like confession. The two of them sat in silence, two soldiers from different worlds, bound by the same ghosts. Outside, a jeep passed, its headlights slicing briefly through the tent flap. Dust swirled in the beam, hanging there like memory. Finally, Thorne broke the quiet. You know, when they told me they were assigning an analyst to my platoon, I was furious. I noticed, she said dryly. He almost laughed. Yeah, I wasn't subtle. He looked at her again, something softer now behind the hardness. I thought you'd be dead weight. Now I'm starting to think you're the only one holding the rest of us together. She looked down at her hands. I'm not holding anyone together, Commander. I'm just trying not to come apart. The words landed heavier than either expected. Thorne sat back, quiet for a while. Then he said, You ever think about leaving? She tilted her head slightly. I did, once. Tried to build something quiet, but quiet felt wrong. It felt like I'd left too much of myself behind. He nodded slowly, understanding more than he wanted to admit. You ever regret it? Sometimes, she said. Then I remember people like Jax, and I don't. They both looked at the tent flap where the medics had disappeared hours ago. The base loudspeaker crackled faintly, announcing a midnight transport, its voice monotone and distant. Thorne stood, his expression unreadable again, but this time not cold, just weary. You should get some rest, he said. You've earned it. So have you. He gave a dry smile. Rest isn't really in the job description. She gathered her rifle case, slinging it over her shoulder. As she turned to leave, Thorne spoke again, quiet, almost hesitant. Chief. She paused. He looked at her for a long moment before saying, You changed something out there today. I don't know what it is yet, but thank you. Anna held his gaze for a beat. Then she nodded once and stepped out into the night. The air was colder now. The wind off the mountains carried the faint scent of rain, rare, fleeting. The sky stretched black and infinite above her, scattered with stars like bullet holes through velvet. She walked past the quiet vehicles, past the sleeping tents, toward the edge of the compound where the fence met the open desert. The world beyond glowed faintly under moonlight, empty, endless, beautiful in its indifference. She stopped there for a moment, letting the wind whip through her hair. Somewhere behind her, a generator coughed and sputtered. Somewhere ahead, a faint thunder rolled across the peaks. She closed her eyes. In the dark, the day replayed again. The shots, the shouts, the silence after. Every sound, every heartbeat, every loss. And then, as if answering a question she hadn't asked, a single thought surfaced in her mind. It's never the fight that breaks you, it's the quiet afterward. Her eyes opened. The wind tugged at her collar. She turned and walked back toward the dim glow of the base. Behind her, the mountains loomed like sleeping giants, silent witnesses to everything said and unsaid. And in that quiet, between guilt and grace, something small but certain began to take root. Respect. Not demanded, not declared, just earned. Morning came without fanfare. No trumpet of orders, no bark of authority, just the faint hum of generators and the slow rise of light spilling across the base. Dust hung in the air like mist, catching the dawn in a haze of gold and gray. Anna sat on the low stone wall near the comms tower, boots resting in the sand, coffee cooling between her palms. She had been awake since before sunrise, unable to find sleep. The desert had that effect. It didn't let go of the night easily. From where she sat, she could see the range, distant, empty now, and beyond it, the outline of the ridges where they'd fought the night before. The smoke was gone, but she could still see it in her mind. War had a way of leaving ghosts behind, not people, but moments, frozen seconds that played on repeat behind closed eyes. The sound of footsteps broke her stillness. Rico. He approached quietly, hands tucked into his vest, face unshaven, eyes bloodshot from a night of no sleep. He stopped beside her and looked out at the horizon. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He shook his head, managing a weak smile. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that valley, the flashes, the smoke, and that sound, you know, the way bullets sound when they're not yours." Anna took a sip of coffee. "Yeah, I know." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the bass wake up, the clank of tools, the rattle of a Humvee starting up, the faint voice of someone swearing at a broken antenna. Rico spoke again. "You ever get used to it, the noise?" "No," she said softly, "but you learn to live with it. It's not the noise that gets you anyway." He turned to her. "Then what?" She looked down at her coffee, watching the surface tremble in the breeze. "The silence after." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that part hurts the most." A moment passed before he said, "Thorn's different today." Anna looked up. "Different how?" "Quieter, like he's listening more. To us, to you. I caught him double-checking our comms loadout himself this morning. Never does that." She smiled faintly. "Maybe he's remembering what leadership used to feel like." Rico chuckled under his breath. "You have that effect on people, Chief." "I don't," she said, shaking her head. "Situations do. People just reveal who they are when things fall apart." He studied her for a second. "You think that's what happened to you? You fell apart once." Her eyes flickered, the smile fading. "Everyone does. Some of us just fall quieter than others." Before Rico could respond, a voice called out from across the compound. "Gear up, briefing in 10. Thorn." Anna stood, brushing the dust from her trousers. Rico followed, his usual swagger gone, replaced by something steadier. As they walked toward the operations tent, the energy in the air felt different. The men still joked, still moved with that casual arrogance SEALs carried like armor, but underneath something else pulsed. focus, purpose. When Anna stepped inside, the conversation dipped for a moment, just enough to notice. Eyes flicked her way, then quickly back to the map spread across the table. Not avoidance, acknowledgement. Thorne stood at the head of the table, marker in hand, lines of red drawn through mountain passes. "All right," he said, voice level. "Last night's mess didn't go unnoticed. Command wants us back out there. This time we do it clean." He pointed to a cluster of coordinates. "Recon confirms the relay wasn't destroyed. They shifted operations north, new compound, higher elevation. Same enemy, same encryption tech, different terrain." He glanced at Anna briefly. "Chief Sharma will handle the Overwatch grid again. Rico, you're on spot. Everyone else runs perimeter and extraction support." No objections, no smirks, no questions. Thorne continued, tone clipped but clear. "This isn't revenge, it's correction. We go quiet, we come back alive." As the briefing ended, the men filed out, murmuring in low tones, adjusting packs and weapons. Rico lingered near the exit, glancing back once before disappearing into the sun. Thorne capped the marker and turned to Anna. "Chief." She stopped, meeting his eyes. "You trust this terrain?" "I trust what I can see," she said. "The rest I adapt to." He nodded slowly, thoughtful. "You think they'll be waiting again?" "They always are." A small, knowing silence hung between them. Thorne exhaled. "You know, I used to think experience was about how many fights you survived. I'm starting to realize it's about how you survive them." Anna tilted her head slightly. "That's a good start, Commander." He gave a quiet chuckle. "Coming from you, I'll take it as progress." They held each other's gaze a moment longer, not as superior and subordinate, but as equals who'd both seen too much and learned to stop pretending they hadn't. Then she turned and walked out into the light. The next 12 hours blurred into ritual. Packing, calibrating, rehearsing, rechecking. Every action had rhythm like a heartbeat. But beneath it all, something unspoken flowed through the team, a shift. Jokes carried less bite, orders met less resistance. There was still pride, still edge, but now it was tempered. Rico noticed it most. When Thorne corrected him, it didn't sting. When Anna spoke, no one second-guessed her. They didn't say it out loud, but something about watching her, calm under fire, composed in chaos, had recalibrated their definition of strength. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the mountains, Anna sat near the armory, cleaning her rifle. Rico approached again, dropping a small bundle beside her. "What's this?" she asked. "Your broken rifle, the MK-22. I had Gunner fix it. New rail, new mount, she's clean again." She looked down at the weapon, running a hand over the cold metal. The surface gleamed flawless. "She doesn't look the same," she said softly. Rico shrugged. "Still yours, though." Anna smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I liked her better when she had a scar." He frowned. "Why?" "Because scars remind you what you survived." He went quiet, looking at the ground. "I've got a few of those myself." "I know," she said gently. "Just make sure you remember them for the right reasons." They worked in silence for a while, side by side, the rhythmic click of tools and the soft scrape of brushes filling the air. When they finished, Rico leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "You think this next op's gonna be worse?" Anna smiled without looking up. "It's always worse, but it's never impossible." He nodded. "You always talk like that." "Like what?" "Like you already know how it ends." Her hand stilled. "I don't," she said. "I just know what it costs." Night came fast. The base lights flickered on, buzzing faintly against the desert dark. Anna stood outside her tent, looking up at the stars. They were impossibly bright, too bright for a world that had seen so much blood. She thought about the men she'd met here. Thorne, Rico, Jax. All of them shaped by discipline, bound by duty, each one pretending they weren't afraid. And maybe that was what courage really was. Not the absence of fear, but the quiet decision to keep moving through it. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing over a small folded photo, one she rarely looked at. Her and her father, years ago, standing on a firing range not so different from this one. He had been teaching her how to breathe between heartbeats. Calm isn't something you find, Anna, he'd said back then. It's something you build, one breath at a time. She spent a lifetime proving him right. Her comms radio crackled softly at her hip. Chief, it was Thorne. Go ahead. Convoy leaves in 20, you good? She smiled slightly at the formality in his voice. Always. See you on the ridge. The line went dead. Anna turned toward the convoy line, trucks idling, engines low, headlights painting thin white lines through the dust. She took a deep breath and walked toward them, boots crunching softly in the dirt. The night air was cold now, the kind that sank deep into the bones, but she felt steady, ready. Thorne met her by the lead truck. Everything checks, he said. She nodded. Then we're already ahead of yesterday. He smirked faintly. Let's keep it that way. As the engines revved and the convoy began to roll out, Anna climbed into her seat. The vibration beneath her feet was familiar, the hum of movement, the sound of inevitability. She glanced out the window as the base lights shrank behind them, swallowed by the desert. Ahead the mountains waited again, silent, ancient, patient. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. None of them did. But for the first time since arriving, the platoon wasn't 12 men and one outsider. They were one team. And for Anna, that was enough. Hours later, as they reached the foothills, the radios crackled with static. The pilot's voice came through faintly from the Overwatch drone. Eagle Eye to Delta, be advised. Wind shear increasing over the pass. Visibility dropping fast. Thorne swore under his breath. Great, just what we needed. Anna adjusted her headset. We'll adapt. He looked at her. You always say that. Because it's always true. She smiled faintly, but inside her pulse quickened. Wind meant chaos, and chaos always came with opportunity for those ready to listen. As the convoy wound deeper into the mountains, the air grew colder, thinner. The radio hissed again, fragments of transmission breaking through. Unconfirmed movement, northern ridge, possible outpost. Anna leaned forward. Say again, Eagle Eye. But the line was gone. Only static. Thorne met her eyes. No words, just that silent understanding between soldiers who'd already seen how quickly peace could turn into survival. The convoy slowed, the headlights cut through mist. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, rare, hard, and cold, Anna felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. The kind that came right before the world shifted again. The rain came hard and sudden. Not the kind that cooled the air, but the kind that blurred the world into noise. Fat, cold drops smacked against metal and sand, turning dust into mud within minutes. The convoy slowed, wipers fighting a losing battle against sheets of water. Visibility dropped to near zero. Thorne leaned forward in the passenger seat, peering through the streaked windshield. Driver, cut the lights. We're too exposed like this. The headlights vanished, leaving them in darkness. Only the faint glow of instrument panels lit the interior. Rico's voice came over the comms, distorted by static. Visibility's gone, sir. I've got nothing on thermals. The pass is choking with fog. Copy, Thorne replied. Everyone hold position until it clears. The trucks ground to a halt. Engines idled. The rain pounded on steel roofs like distant gunfire. Anna sat in the back seat, eyes fixed on her tablet. The terrain map flickered with interference, satellite link fading in and out. Comms are degrading, she said. The storm's jamming the signal. We'll lose drone feed if this continues. Thorne exhaled sharply. Of course we will. He rubbed his face. staring out into the storm. For a man built on precision and control, this was the worst possible battlefield, one where nature itself stripped away all predictability. Anna watched him for a moment. The muscles in his jaw worked against restraint. She could see the weight settling again, the weight of command, the invisible burden that made good men crumble under silence. "Permission to step out," she said quietly. He looked at her, frowning. "Step out in this." "Yes, I need to feel what the wind's doing. The instruments can't read the pass anymore. I can." He hesitated. "You'll freeze." "I won't." Something in her tone, calm, grounded, certain, made him relent. "Go." She opened the door. The wind slammed into her instantly, sharp and cold, carrying the metallic taste of mountain air. The rain soaked her within seconds, running down her neck, stinging her skin. She crouched low, stepping away from the headlights. The pass stretched before her, a narrow cut between jagged rock faces, choked with mist. The rain made the ground slick, but she moved with purpose, her senses adjusting. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened. The wind wasn't random. It came in patterns, gusts that shifted direction every few seconds, echoes bouncing between cliffs. She could feel where the valley narrowed, where sound would travel, where a hidden ridge might mask movement. Old instincts stirred, the same ones that once kept her alive on a mountainside with only a broken radio and a rifle. When she returned to the truck, she was dripping wet, but her expression was calm. "Talk to me," Thorne said immediately. "The storm's coming from the north. It's pinning sound in the pass. Anyone up ahead could hear us before we hear them. We can't keep convoy formation. It's too loud, too predictable." "So we wait." "No," she said. "We split, 2 vehicles stay. One moves forward slow, no lights, minimal noise. Scout the terrain until we clear the choke point. We'll regroup once we have line of sight." Thorne hesitated. "You're suggesting we separate in zero visibility." "I'm suggesting we move like the storm, unpredictable. Anyone watching will be waiting for a convoy, not ghosts." He looked at her for a long second, then nodded slowly. "Fine. You take the lead with Rico. I'll hold the rear until you signal clear." Anna gave a curt nod. "Copy." Rico switched vehicles without a word, climbing into the driver's seat beside her. His grin was gone, replaced by that focused stillness he wore only when the world demanded his best. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." They moved. The engine purred low, barely audible over the rain. The truck crawled forward, tires slipping on the wet rock. The wipers squealed across the glass, useless against the downpour. Anna leaned out the window slightly, scanning the darkness ahead. The mountains were alive with noise, wind howling through crevices, rain hissing on stone. It sounded like whispers, like ghosts talking in tongues. She checked her compass, then the map, both unreliable now. The only thing she could trust was instinct. Rico glanced at her. "You sure we're not lost?" "We're not lost," she said quietly. "We're just unseen." He smirked faintly. "That's comforting." "Wasn't meant to be." They drove in silence for a while, the road barely visible beneath the water. The slope narrowed, rocks jutting like teeth from the earth. Anna's hands rested steady on her rifle, eyes scanning the edges of the fog. Then movement. A flicker, a shape. "Stop." Rico hit the brakes. The truck skidded slightly, then settled. Anna leaned forward, squinting through the mist. Something had shifted near the ridge, a darker shadow moving through the gray. She raised her rifle, resting it against the window frame. The wind howled again, lifting sheets of rain like curtains. Through the break, she saw it clearly, the faint silhouette of a man, crouched low, a weapon slung across his back. Not one of theirs. "Rico," she whispered, "we've got company." He tensed. "How many?" She adjusted her scope. Another shape appeared, then another. "At least 6, moving parallel to the ridge line." He cursed under his breath. You think they spotted us? Not yet, but they will. She considered her options. If she fired, they'd know exactly where she was. If she didn't, they'd walk right into the convoy. She keyed her comms. Static answered. The storm had swallowed the frequency whole. She looked at Rico. No comms, no support. So what do we do? Anna exhaled slowly. We change the story. He blinked. What? She pointed to the narrow ravine running off the side of the pass. We go down there, circle wide, hit them from below before they reach Thorn. That's suicide. No, she said calmly, it's geometry. Rico stared at her for a beat, then shook his head with a half-laugh. You're insane. Probably. He gripped the wheel tighter. Then let's be insane together. They turned off the main track, the tires biting into softer ground. The slope dropped sharply, mud spraying as they descended into the ravine. The world shrank around them, walls of rock rising high, closing them in. The sound of rain grew muffled, replaced by the low rumble of distant thunder. Anna directed him with quiet precision. Keep right, stay low, we'll come out below their line. How do you even know this will work? She looked at him, rain dripping from her chin. Because it has to. Minutes passed. Every second felt stretched, fragile. The terrain grew rougher, forcing them to abandon the vehicle and move on foot. They climbed the last few meters in silence, mud clinging to their boots, water running down their faces. When they reached the ridge, Anna dropped prone, lifting her rifle. Above them, the enemy patrol was moving fast, silhouettes cutting through mist, weapons up. They hadn't noticed the pair below. Anna sighted in, breath steady. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. She could feel the pulse in her wrist, the rhythm she'd learned to ride between heartbeats. The first shot cracked through the storm, muted by distance, but sharp enough to send one silhouette tumbling backward. Chaos followed. Voices shouted in a language the wind tore apart. The patrol scattered. Rico opened fire beside her, controlled bursts. The fight was brief, less than a minute of sound, flashes, and rain, then silence again. The kind of silence that always felt heavier than the noise. Rico's breathing was ragged. That's it. For now. She keyed the comm again, still nothing. We've got to warn Thorn, he said. We will, she replied, but we can't go back the way we came, too exposed. So what's the plan? She looked up through the fog. We climb. He groaned. You really are built different. Keep moving, Vargas, she said, voice soft but firm. You can sleep when we're safe. They started the ascent, hands gripping slick rock, boots scraping for purchase. The climb was brutal, the kind that punished hesitation. By the time they reached the top, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The clouds thinned, revealing faint starlight breaking through. From this height, Anna could see the convoy far below, three faint shapes in the dark, still waiting, unaware. She pulled out a flare from her vest, red, silent, the kind that burned without light, visible only through NV. She fired it high. It arced silently, invisible to the naked eye, but to anyone with night optics it blazed bright as blood. A signal. Minutes later, a reply flashed back, two short bursts. Thorn's code, he'd seen it. Anna exhaled, lowering the flare gun. Rico leaned against the rock, exhausted but grinning. You're out of your damn mind, Chief. Probably, she said again. He laughed quietly. You know, before all this I thought strength was about being loud, showing off. Now I think it's just being like you. She didn't answer. The compliment wasn't hers to hold. She just stared into the dark valley, where the convoy lights shimmered faintly through fog. Strength, she said softly, isn't being unbreakable. It's carrying what breaks you and still moving forward. Rico followed her gaze, silent now. The storm drifted east, its thunder fatting. The mountains stood quiet again, their sharp edges softened by mist. For the first time all night, Anna allowed herself a single long breath, deep, grounding, real. They survived another storm. But she knew this wasn't over. Storms like these never ended, they just changed shape. And somewhere inside her, beneath the calm and control, she felt the old ache stirring, the reminder that leadership wasn't about command. It was about conscience. And conscience, she'd learned, was the heaviest weapon of all. By morning, the sky was the color of steel. The storm had broken, but its echo lingered, low thunder rolling far off in the east, like a memory that refused to fade. The convoy idled near a dry creek bed, engines rumbling softly as the men regrouped. The smell of wet dust hung thick in the air. Steam rose from the vehicles in thin silver streams. Thorne stood beside the lead truck, headset pressed tight against his ear, voice clipped. "Copy that, base. We're intact. Negative on casualties. Yes, we lost contact during the storm. No, we're not aborting." A pause, static. Then a harder tone from the other end. One Anna could almost hear even from several meters away. Thorne's jaw flexed, understood. He dropped the headset onto the seat and exhaled through his nose, the kind of sigh that comes from holding too much too long. Anna approached, her boots squelching softly in the mud. Rico trailed behind her, rubbing dried rain from his weapon. "Command isn't happy," Thorne said without looking up. "They rarely are," she replied. He gave a dry laugh. "They want us to push north, find the relay, finish the job, weather be damned." "Typical," she said. "They see lines on a map, not the mountain under them." Thorne finally met her eyes. "They also know what's at stake. That relay isn't just enemy comms, it's data on civilian frequencies. If it stays active, it can track local allies, people who helped us." "So it's not just a target," Anna said quietly. "It's a promise." He nodded, "And promises cost time we don't have." For a moment neither spoke. The wind hissed through the grass, cold and damp. Rico looked between them. "We move now." Thorne hesitated. "We move light, no convoy, small team. Overwatch stays with me this time." Anna's brow lifted slightly. "That's new." "You've earned the right to call the angles," he said. "Besides," he gave a faint, weary smirk, "I'd rather have you watching my back than command watching my mistakes." She almost smiled. "That's progress, Commander." He grunted, "Don't get used to it." They left the vehicles behind, trekking on foot through slick terrain. The sun never fully broke through the clouds, giving the world a muted gray tone. Every sound carried farther, boots sliding on gravel, the click of a safety catch, the rasp of breath under altitude. Anna led from the center, an unusual position for an Overwatch operator, but Thorne trusted her eyes more than his instruments now. She scanned constantly, her mind running parallel equations: distance, wind, terrain, temperature. It wasn't numbers she trusted, it was rhythm. Every mountain had one. You learned it by listening. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow plateau overlooking a valley scattered with crumbling stone huts. The air smelled faintly of burned wood. Thorne raised a hand. The team froze. "Eyes on," he whispered. Anna dropped to a crouch, unfolding her rifle, setting it against a rock ledge. She peered through the scope. At first she saw nothing. Then movement, a flicker inside one of the huts, a figure dragging a cable across the floor. Her pulse steadied. "Got them." Thorne moved beside her, binoculars up. "How many?" "3 visible, possibly more inside. They're rerouting power from a generator. That's our relay." He lowered the binoculars. "Orders are simple: neutralize, recover hardware." She kept watching. "One of them's not armed." "Civilians." "Could be technicians. Locals, hard to say." Thorne's jaw tightened. "We can't risk letting them transmit again." Anna's hand rested lightly on the rifle stock. "Then we need to know who they are before we pull the trigger." He turned to her. "We don't have time for that." Her gaze didn't leave the scope. We always have time to make sure we're not killing the wrong people. Rico shifted uneasily behind them. The tension between the two felt electric, quiet but sharp. Thorne exhaled, looking down at the dirt. You think Command would hesitate? I'm not Command, she said. No, he replied softly. You're better than that. The admission landed between them like an anchor, heavy, irrevocable. He crouched beside her, scanning again. The wind tugged at their collars. If you're right, we can't engage until we're sure. But if you're wrong, they finish their upload and every friendly informant in the region dies. Anna's pulse stayed steady, but her thoughts raced. Every decision in war is a coin toss. One side survival, the other regret. She watched through her scope as one of the men stepped outside, stretching. He looked young, too young. No uniform, no weapon, just exhaustion written across his face. She keyed her comm quietly. Rico, take flank left. If things go sideways, you have cover fire. Copy. Thorne frowned. We're improvising now. She gave him a small, calm look. It's what I do. They waited. The minutes dragged. The cold crept into her fingers, but she didn't move. Finally, a truck appeared from the far edge of the valley, old, dented, carrying 3 more men. Locals. Not insurgents. She zoomed in. None carried rifles. They had boxes of tools, coils of cable. Her breath caught. They're not enemy, they're fixing it. Thorne's brows furrowed. Fixing what? Communications, power for someone else. The realization hit both of them at once. The relay wasn't transmitting enemy data. It was intercepting it. This wasn't a hostile outpost. It was a listening post. One of theirs, abandoned after the last rotation. Command didn't know or didn't care. Thorne's expression hardened. They're going to bomb this site. Anna's heart tightened. We have to stop them. He looked at her, the decision already made in his eyes. We call it in. Tell them what we found. She shook her head. You think they'll listen? You report this and they'll call it compromised and burn it anyway. Easier than admitting they made a mistake. He cursed under his breath, slamming a hand against the rock. Then what? He said. We go rogue, defy direct orders. She met his gaze steady. We tell the truth, Commander, even if they don't want to hear it. He stared at her for a long second, rainwater dripping from his helmet brim. Then slowly he nodded. You're right. He pulled his radio, switching frequencies to the secure channel. This is Delta Actual to Command. Request hold on strike authorization. Repeat, hold on strike. Site not hostile. Repeat, not hostile. Static. Then a cold voice. Delta Actual, you are off protocol. Orders confirmed. Strike inbound, 2 minutes. Negative. We have friendly assets in proximity. Orders stand. Evacuate. The line went dead. Thorne stared at the radio, then at Anna. They're going to hit it anyway. She was already moving. Then we move faster. They ran. The descent was brutal, mud and loose rock giving way beneath their boots. The valley floor came up hard and fast. The locals inside the compound looked up in shock as the 2 SEALs burst in, rifles low but voices high. Get out, airstrike incoming, Anna shouted, waving them toward the trucks. Now. They didn't understand the words, but the urgency needed no translation. The men dropped tools, scattering for cover. Thorne grabbed one by the arm, dragging him toward the exit. Move, go. Anna sprinted to the generator, cutting the power feed, her hands moving instinctively through cables and switches. Rico's voice crackled faintly in her ear, barely cutting through static. Chief, what's happening? Strike inbound, get clear. Hell no. Move Vargas, she barked. The air shifted, a low, distant roar. She looked up. Through the thinning clouds she saw it, 2 faint glints slicing across the sky. Missiles. She dove behind the wall, grabbing Thorne and pulling him down with her. The blast hit seconds later, light, sound, and heat collapsing the world into chaos. The shockwave lifted dust and debris in a single violent breath. The ground buckled. Silence followed, a ringing, endless silence broken only by the crackle of fire. Anna coughed, pushing herself up. Smoke clawed at her lungs. The compound was gone, walls shattered, the relay reduced to twisted metal. But the truck the locals had taken was halfway up the ridge, engine sputtering, men alive inside. They made it barely. Thorne staggered to his feet beside her, face streaked with soot. His voice was raw. "You saved them." "No," she said quietly, eyes on the burning wreckage. "We just stopped one mistake from erasing another." He followed her gaze, the flames reflected in his eyes, gold and hollow. "They'll court-martial me for this." "They'll forget about you in a week," she said. "They always do." He looked at her then, not as a subordinate, not even as a peer, but as someone who saw through the same thin lie he'd been telling himself for years. "That doesn't bother you?" he asked. Anna's voice was soft, steady. "The truth's heavier than orders, but it lasts longer." For a while they stood there in the smoke, saying nothing. The mountain wind picked up again, scattering ash across the ground like gray snow. Rico's voice came faintly through the radio, cracked but alive. "Chief, you good?" She pressed the transmitter. "We're here, everyone's clear." A long pause, then his voice again, lighter this time. "Figured, you're impossible to kill." She smiled faintly. Not impossible, just stubborn. By the time they regrouped, the sky had cleared completely. The sunset turned the peaks copper and gold, washing the wreckage in light too beautiful for what it illuminated. The locals had left. The valley was empty again, quiet, except for the wind through the grass. Thorne knelt beside the ruined relay, running a hand across the scorched metal. "All that work," he murmured, "gone in seconds." Anna crouched beside him. "It served its purpose." He looked up, which was to remind us that orders aren't always right. He gave a hollow laugh. "You realize that's the kind of thing that gets people discharged." "Maybe," she said, "but it's also what keeps them human." He didn't answer. The sun dipped lower, casting their shadows long across the ground. Anna stood, slinging her rifle across her shoulder. "We should go. Command will be looking for an explanation." Thorne rose slowly. "You have one ready." She glanced back at him. "Always." As they walked away, the light faded, the valley swallowed by dusk. Behind them, the burned relay stood like a monument, not to victory, but to choice. And as the night gathered around them, Anna felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not pride, not relief. Peace. The kind that comes not from winning, but from doing the right thing when no one's watching. She looked at Thorne, his face drawn but calm now. "Commander," she said softly, "you asked me once why I stayed when I could have left." He glanced at her. "Yeah." She smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "Because leaving means someone else makes the hard call, and sometimes the silence after an order needs a voice to break it." He nodded, understanding finally. The wind rose, cool and clean. And in that moment, the mountain seemed to exhale, its long, patient breath carrying away the last traces of smoke. The debriefing room was too bright. Not sunlight, fluorescent. Cold, sterile light that hummed faintly against the silence. The kind of light that made every movement feel slower, heavier. Anna sat alone at the steel table, her uniform still streaked with dust from the mountains. Her hands were folded, steady. She hadn't spoken since they'd brought her in. On the far wall, a mirror watched her back. She could almost feel the eyes behind it, command officers, analysts, silent judges dissecting every word before it was even spoken. The door opened with a soft hiss. Commander Thorne stepped inside, followed by a man in a dark suit, intelligence, not military. The difference was in how he carried himself. Calm, detached, like this was paperwork, not consequence. "Chief Sharma," the man began, voice smooth, clipped. "We've reviewed the mission data. Your actions resulted in the prevention of civilian casualties. However, you directly disobeyed a strike authorization." Anna didn't move. "I followed the facts." "The facts," the man said, packing slowly, "are that you and Commander Thorne deviated from protocol." "Protocol was wrong," she said simply. He looked up from his folder, studying her. "And who decides that, Chief? You." She met his gaze without flinching. "Someone had to." A long silence stretched. The man closed the file. "You understand the implications of insubordination at this level." "I understand what happens when no one questions an order." He watched her for another moment, then exhaled quietly. "You've been recommended for administrative review. Pending outcome, you'll remain on base. Restricted operations." Anna gave a single nod. "Understood." He turned to Thorne. "Commander, same applies. Command wants your written statement within 24 hours." Thorne nodded stiffly. "Understood." The man gathered his folder and left, the door hissing shut behind him. Silence again. Thorne sat across from her, elbows on the table, eyes tired but clear. "Well," he said softly, "that went better than I expected." Anna almost smiled. "You expected worse." "I expected bars on the window." She tilted her head. "They won't court-martial us, not this time. Too much gray area, too many civilians." He nodded slowly. "Still, they'll want someone to blame." "They always do." He looked at her for a long moment. "You knew, didn't you? Back at the ridge, you knew they wouldn't listen." She met his eyes. "Yes." "Then why try?" Her voice softened. "Because doing the right thing isn't about winning. It's about trying when no one expects you to." Thorne leaned back in his chair, exhaling through a laugh that wasn't really laughter. "You sound like my old co. He used to say conscience doesn't earn medals." "It shouldn't," she said. "Medals fade, conscience doesn't." He looked down at the table, running a hand over his face. "You think command will bury this?" "I think they'll rewrite it," she replied. "Turn it into something easier to understand." He gave a small, bitter smile. "Heroes and villains." "Always," she said. "That's how stories survive." Thorne studied her for a while, then asked, "And what about you? How do you survive?" She paused. "I stopped trying to be a story." Days passed. The base returned to rhythm. Engines roared, briefings resumed, soldiers came and went. War doesn't wait for morality. Anna spent her days in silence, assisting training exercises, reviewing ballistics, helping rookies calibrate their scopes. Routine became armor. Rico stopped by every evening carrying 2 cups of bad coffee. He'd sit beside her on the edge of the range, talking about anything but the mission. Football scores, old music, a stray dog that had adopted the motor pool. She listened, smiled sometimes, but said little. Her mind still lived on that mountain, in the wind, the silence, the look in Thorne's eyes when the blast faded. One evening, as the sun sank low and the range turned gold, Rico finally asked what had been on his mind for days. "Do you ever regret it, going against them?" Anna took a slow sip, then looked at the horizon. "Regret means wishing you hadn't done it. I don't." He nodded. "But it cost you." "It always does," she said softly. "Doing nothing costs more." He studied her profile, calm, unreadable, the way she always was before she said something that stayed with you. "You know," he said, "people talk about what happened up there. Not official, of course, but word travels. They're calling it the Valley Stand." She smiled faintly. "Sounds dramatic." "Yeah, they say you stopped a bomb with your conscience." "That's not true," she said. "I just stood where no one else wanted to." He chuckled under his breath. "That's why they'll remember it." She looked down at the dirt, drawing a line through it with her boot. "They'll remember the story, not the reason. They always do." Rico was quiet for a long moment. "You ever think about leaving? You could. Start over somewhere far from all this. Anna's eyes softened. I used to, not anymore. Why? She turned toward him. Because leaving does erase what you've seen. It just changes the view. The sky had darkened to blue-gray now. The first stars began to appear. Rico finished his coffee, stood and stretched. You're something else, Chief. I'm just still here, she said. He smiled. That's something. Later that night, she walked alone through the base, the hum of generators a low rhythm beneath her footsteps. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust. She passed the hangar where mechanics worked under flickering lights. Beyond it, the small memorial garden, a quiet place, mostly for ghosts. She stopped there. Rows of metal plaques glinted under the floodlights, each engraved with a name. Some she knew, others she'd only heard once in briefings in whispers. She crouched beside one, tracing the letters with a gloved finger. No speeches, no salute, just silence. Because silence, she'd learned, was the only thing that truly honored the dead. She stood again, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Above, the night was wide and endless. Her comms crackled faintly, a voice breaking through static. Chief, you there? Thorne. I'm here. Command closed the report. Officially, the strike destroyed an enemy data node. No mention of the civilians or us. Anna's lips curved slightly. Expected. They reassigned me, he said. Training division, stateside. That's not punishment, she said. It's distance. He paused. What about you? Still here. He exhaled. Of course you are. She smiled faintly. You'd miss the place without me. He chuckled softly, static cutting through. Don't ever change, Chief. I already did, she said quietly. You just didn't notice. The line went silent for a long time, then clicked off. She lowered the radio and looked back toward the range, where faint floodlights shimmered in the distance. Somewhere a trainee fired a shot. The echo rolled through the valley, soft and steady. Anna closed her eyes, listened, breathed. The rhythm was familiar, the same one her father had taught her, calm between heartbeats. She whispered to the wind, still building it, Dad. And then she smiled. Weeks passed. The world moved on. New missions replaced old ones. Reports were filed, medals awarded, names forgotten. But inside the base, quiet moments remained. A photo pinned to a wall, 12 soldiers and one woman, standing in a line, dust in their hair and fire behind their eyes. No caption, no context, just truth. Some nights, when the wind blew from the north, Anna would sit outside her tent and listen to the distant hum of the desert. It was never truly silent, not here. There was always something alive beneath the stillness, memory, promise, the faint pulse of duty that never really ends. She'd watch the stars, their light older than every war she'd fought, and think about the people who never got to come back. And about those who did, and had to carry what they saw. People like Thorne, Rico herself. Sometimes she'd wonder what courage really meant. It wasn't medals, it wasn't missions. It was this, sitting alone under a sky too big for answers, knowing the world will never know your story, and being at peace with that. Because dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It moves quietly, does what must be done, and fades back into silence. The night deepened. The last lights of the base flickered out one by one. Anna stood, stretching, the air cool against her skin. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the next mission was already waiting. She picked up her rifle, the same one that once broke, the one that now carried a new scar along its barrel. It wasn't perfect, neither was she. But both still worked. She slung it over her shoulder, took one last look at the stars, and whispered not to the sky, but to the silence itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Then she walked into the dark, and the wind carried her name softly across the sand. Not as legend, not as myth, but as memory.